oppose the government's cynical attacks on working people. Thank you, Sir Edward.
Chairmanship, and I pay tribute, as others have done, to the member for bringing this very timely debate. Like others, I'm fully supportive of the strike action that's been taken. I think the actions proposed by the government, especially with regard to the transport strikes bill, is entirely unacceptable and counterproductive. As others have said, no one chooses to go on strike. Apocryphal tales of strikes on a whim and fancy, whether in the motor industry in the Midlands or the shipyards in the Clyde in the 1970s, are simply apocryphal tales. It is even harder now to go on strike, and the consequences are probably even greater given the cost of living crisis that we face. People do not choose to go on strike in a whim or fancy. The loss of income is significant. They worry about the danger and the damage that they do to those whose interests they work and serve in. And also, there's also the practical fact that once you return to work, it's considerably difficult because you've got to catch up because work has to be done that has piled up. I do also accept, though, that it is difficult for government dealing with public sector strikes. Often you're responsible and answerable for agencies without having direct control over various departments or governments, having been there myself, as I'll make some comments. But as others have said, the right to strike is fundamental. In a democracy, it cannot simply be that you get the dubious privilege of being able to vote once every 4 or 5 years, although it's becoming even harder if you're going to have to produce identification, which many people will not have. But it also has to be able to control the terms and conditions of your work and of your life. It's why the ability to withhold rent is significant and why those in benefits direct often face difficulties in dealing with landlords. The right to strike is fundamental, and it's not simply about pay. It's also about terms and conditions of employment. Not everybody in our democracy does have the right to strike. I recall as Justice Secretary that police do not have the right to strike. I don't think anybody challenges that. I think, though, that we probably do have to go further to ensure that things like the Police Negotiating Board, where people don't have that right, actually do have the opportunity to enforce positions upon government and other agencies. There has to be a quid pro quo for that being taken away. I did hear a member refer to the inability of the POA to strike. Can I say in Scotland, they do have the right to strike. I was offered that dubious denial in Scotland by Jack Straw, but I declined it. And I have to say that the POA has always actually retained that trust. They did come out and strike during my period of office, but they gave us notice. They were out for a limited period, and they conducted themselves in a dignified manner, for which I'm extremely grateful. But the attempt to withhold the ability for people to come out and strike is fundamentally wrong. And the bill being brought in by the UK government also strikes the heart of devolution. In Scotland, we do have CalMac, which is basically the government carrier. We have ScotRail, that is the provision for rail that is provided and owned by the Scottish government. And yet the powers are here being taken by a Transport Secretary in a government that isn't representative in Scotland. I've been critical of the Scottish Government on ScotRail, especially on CalMac and ferries. But at the end of the day, the solution is to democratise that, so we do get a people's CalMac. So not only are the government represented, but those who are served by it in the communities, and indeed those who work in it, are provided for. What we shouldn't be doing is taking away the right to strike. And as I say, this fundamentally undermines the position of the Scottish Government, and it should not be taking place. The relationship that was built up, whether, as I say, between myself and the POA, should also be capable of being replicated between the Scottish Government and the RMT, and I think they are in a better place than south of the border. The solution is always and must always be dialogue and discussion, not an attempt to dragoon people back into work and to take steps to undermine that fundamental democratic right. This is the wrong direction, but as I say, at the present moment, my sympathies and my support go to those on strike because they basically need it in this cost of living crisis.